All right. Hi, everyone. Hope all is well. We are continuing the learning of the Haggadah, and over the past classes, we had an introduction on the Haggadah, an introduction on the obligations that we have for the Haggadah and the Seder, and then last class we did the first four of the 15 steps of the Haggadah, and that is Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. That's doing the Kiddush. Then that's washing the hands, dipping the celery or the karpas in the salt water. Following that was the yachatz number 4, and that is the splitting of the middle matzah. Today what we are going to get into, and this is going to be a first part of 3 classes on the main part of our Seder, and that is Maggid. Maggid is the 5th of the 15 steps, and it is when we fulfill our main obligation of recounting the story of the Exodus. Again, where is our obligation? This obligation can be found in Exodus chapter 13 verse 8, and it says as follows, and I read, V'higadta lebincha bayomahu lemor, ba'avur ze asa Adonai li b'tziti Mitzrayim, and you shall tell your son on that day, when he asks you, saying, because of this, the Lord did this for me when I went out of Egypt. And that is the obligation that we are to tell over our children, the story in its great detail of the Exodus. So V'higadta lebincha, you should tell it over to your children. So that's what we're going to be fulfilling primarily this evening and during this section. Now, many ask, why is it that we do not make a blessing on this mitzvah of V'higadta lebincha, or even in general for the Seder and for the Haggadah? So there's 3 answers given. The first answer is given by the Rashba, and he says since there's no amount to this mitzvah, we can't make a blessing. Meaning there's no minimum, there's no maximum. There's no minimum, just like, I'll give you an example, when it comes to the obligation, the mitzvah of honoring your father and your mother. There is no minimum requirement. If you honor them or you do something for them, even a little bit, you're already fulfilling it. So that's why there's no blessing made when you honor your parents. So too, there's no maximum. You're never done honoring them as well. And that is the same when it comes to the mitzvah of the recounting of the Exodus. Second answer is given by the Pri Megadim, and he says that you can fulfill this mitzvah in thought, and therefore you could have already thought about it, and then you can't make a blessing after you already fulfilled the mitzvah. And the third answer is given by the Birkat Shir, and he says already in the Kiddush, when we said Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, we already, remembering that we left Egypt, we already made the blessing over there. There is a very interesting tradition, minhag, that is done by many Sephardic families, and it'd be something that you can take upon yourself, maybe you've never done it before, and that is the minhag of right at the beginning of the Haggadah part, right now, this Maggid, before we start with Halach Ma'anya, many take the Seder plate and they go around doing what's called the Bibhilu. Bibhilu is when the Seder plate is taken and gone around on top of each and every person, and it's waved around 3 times, and we say Bibhilu Yatzanu Mitzrayim. We say Hashem took us out of Egypt in a very fast. Bibhilu means in a rush, in a speed. Halach ma'anya b'nei chorin. This is our bread of the poor man, and today we are free, which is a synopsis of this halach ma'anya portion that we're about to say. There's different tunes. There's Bibhilu yatzanu mi Mitzrayim, halach ma'anya b'nei chorin, yalala. That's one way we do it, and it goes on top of each and every one of the family members, and then on top of the whole table. There's another tune, it goes Bibhilu yatzanu mi Mitzrayim, halach ma'anya b'nei chorin. A shout out to my dear friend Yariv Oliel, who taught us that tune when we shared the couple years that we did the Sidarim together. This is done at this point. Now, as an introduction to the mitzvah V'higadta lebincha, the Haggadah gives us this introduction of Halach Ma'anya, telling us about this poor man's bread. So the question is, why is this used as an introduction to the Haggadah part? And there are a couple different answers. Answer number one, given by the Kolbo, as many of the things we do by including the children in the Haggadah it is there as an explanation to what we just did. What did we just do? We just cracked in the step 4, Yachatz, we cracked the middle matzah. And now we are telling them what it is. This is the halach manya, this is the poor man's bread. This is the bread that our parents ate in Egypt while they were in Egypt and when they left. Another answer by the Machzor Vitri is what we're doing is we're explaining to the kids now from the get-go why we eat matzah. From the very beginning of the Seder, we're going to be eating it multiple times and we're going to be referring to it multiple times. We want to tell the children what this matzah is, where it comes from. The Abarbanel gives a different answer, and he says what we're doing is we're inviting all those who need and anyone who does not have a place to do the Seder to partake in our Seder. And that's what we call out in the middle, inviting everyone to come. Rabbi Glazerson explains that, and he says, really the hallmark of our Seder is the night. The hallmark of our Seder night is our hospitality. It's us being hospitable to other people, which is the greatest sign of and even action of true freedom. You see, only free people are able to invite others to their table. A slave can't invite a guest and can't invite someone else. So what we're doing is we're expressing our freedom by declaring halach ma'anya, this is the bread of our poor person. So different customs when it comes to halach ma'anya. The first is some people lift the middle matzah and proclaiming this is the poor man's bread, and as we said, the poor man, he eats part now and eats part later. That's why they pick up the broken one. Others pick up all 3 matzot, really the 2.5, and that's how they do it. Now others do the following, and I want you to listen very closely to this. This is a very, very deep concept. Rabbi Glazerson, this is his Haggadah. If you ever are able to get this, it's very, very hard to find. It's an amazing Haggadah. Rabbi Matityahu Glazerson explains in Haggadah the following fascinating custom with its reason behind. So some have the custom to lift the entire Seder plate for the Halach Manya paragraph, the introduction to the entire Haggadah, and he gives a reason for this in a beautiful way. Listen to it. It applies very much to this year, Pesach 2020. Which has the unfortunate pandemic of COVID-19. Listen to the following. He says that lifting something expresses the willingness for someone to get close and to unite to God through that item. Now, the ke'ara, which is the Seder plate, has a broader meaning to it. You see in the Hebrew vernacular, and especially in the Hebrew alphabet, sometimes the letters either preceding or after the letters that we are speaking about do shed some very deep light on the matter we are speaking about. So, let's take, for example, the word kiara, which is kuf, ayin, resh, hey. If you take the letters which come after each of the ones, so kuf is followed by resh, and ayin is followed by pei, resh is followed by shin, and hey is followed by vav. If you take those letters, those new letters that we brought together, which in order is resh, pei, shin, vav, that also spells the very famous word of shofar, which is not ironic. Rabbi Glazerson explains that shofar is blown on Rosh Hashanah to annul harsh decrees. He quotes the Tzemach Tzedek that says that blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah annuls these decrees, so too lifting the Pesach Seder plate on Passover is also like blowing a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And the Ben Ish Chai takes it even further. He says that the same power that the shofar has when we blow it on Rosh Hashanah to annul the evil decrees, so too lifting the Kiara on the Seder night has that very same power, and has the power to even annul the very obligation to blow the shofar. So the Zohar says, anyone who observes Pesach properly will not even need to have a judgment on Rosh Hashanah, because their judgment is going to be so positive. So having this in mind, especially this year when we lift the Seder plate, we should have in mind that it is there replacing or functioning in the same manner as the blowing of a shofar annulling evil decrees. We need this year more than ever. So if this is your tradition, even if it's not your tradition, please do me a favor and raise your Pesach Seder plate during the portion of the Halachma Anya. Now, it is also brought down that we read this paragraph 3 times. Important to do. 3 times, some have that tradition, some don't. The reason why three in the halacha, in Jewish law, is something which is a chazakah. It makes it very certain and very strong. That's why we mention it 3 times. Also, one more thing is that this paragraph should be translated at least once in your familiar tongue, whether it's English, French, Hebrew, or Spanish, whatever it may be, at least so that everyone at the table understands it. You see, this paragraph is written in Aramaic, and that's why it is a little more difficult for anyone to understand, even if you have a very good Hebrew. So why would it be written in Aramaic? So I want to give you a sample. We're not going to do this with the entire Haggadah because the Abarbanel Haggadah does have a lot of great gems. This is the Abarbanel's Haggadah. Amazing Haggadah. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel was one of the medieval scholars, a great rabbi, a prolific writer. As we mentioned in our previous classes, he asks many questions, and then he comes to their answers in a very lengthy way, and it is very worthwhile. The person has the patience to actually get through it. So I'm not going to go through the whole part during these classes. However, I want to give us a sample of how deep he really gets into something. So he analyzes this. Why is this paragraph, the Halachma Anya paragraph, written in Aramaic? He gives 3 different answers from other scholars, and he questions and debunks them before giving his own 4th and final answer in a beautiful way. So I'm going to try to do this pretty quick. He gives us at first Rashi and the Ritva's answer, and they say the reason why the Halachma Anya is written in Aramaic is so that the Mazikim, the evil demons, don't understand this part of the Haggadah, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent them from coming and messing up our Seder, since in the paragraph Halachma Anya we're inviting all those who are hungry. The Mazikin, the demons, are unfortunately hungry, and they're hungry for trouble and for destruction, so we don't want to invite them. This is the first answer. He asks 3 questions on this to debunk it. The first is he questions the very existence of Mazikin, at least their power in this world, as many of the other medieval scholars did, amongst them even Maimonides and Moreh Nevuchim. His second question is, well, at this time, how is it so obvious to us that the Mazikim don't understand Aramaic, yet they understand Hebrew? So that's something he battles with. And the third is, how could they ever come and harm us or harm the Seder if they don't have permission from Hashem? Hashem said, Leil Shimurim Hu, that the night of the Pesach Seder is a protected night. So if God doesn't allow them to harm us, why should they be allowed to harm us just because we're saying it in Hebrew and not in Aramaic? So therefore he says it can't be because we're trying to not allow the Mazikim to understand it. So then he gives another answer, the second answer, that of the Abud Raham. The Abud Raham says similarly, but he says, in order that the angels don't understand our Haggadah, this part of the Haggadah, we say it in Aramaic. Why? The Abud Raham explains, because at the very first Pesach, the angels themselves did not sing Shirah, they did not sing praise to God, so they would want to come back and maybe join us now. The Abarbanel asks, firstly, later on we're going to say Hallel, and that's in Hebrew, and that ruins the whole concept. Secondly, what's holding back the angels from singing to Hashem? It's not going to be us, Bnei Israel. And third, the angels do understand Aramaic, and he brings a proof from Gavriel. Malach Gavriel teaches Joseph when he goes to Dotan to try to look for his brothers, and he teaches him 70 languages there. And that's right before Joseph was kidnapped by his brothers and brought down to Egypt. So it is evident that angels definitely understand Aramaic, so there's no point. The third answer is given by an array of scholars: the Ritva, the Ravan, the Reed, the Orchot Chaim, the Shibbolei Aleket, all brought down by the Abarbanel, hold that since the sages themselves who put together the Haggadah lived in Babylon, the spoken language there was Aramaic, and they wanted to publicize this miracle in the language that everyone would understand, including one's own household. That's why it's done in Aramaic. To that, the Abarbanel says, well, then why is this the only paragraph written in Aramaic? Shouldn't the whole Haggadah be in Aramaic? And now he finishes off with his own answer, and his answer is, the Abarbanel says, is that yes, The sages who instituted it and put this together living in Babylon. And in Babylon, they spoke Aramaic. What are we doing at this point? We are going in and we're inviting all those who are needy, all those who are hungry, all those who don't have a Seder to join our Seder. They instituted to do in Aramaic because everyone was the common language. Everyone understood Aramaic back then. That's why they said this part in Aramaic, to make sure that you can invite anyone who didn't have anywhere to go. To the point where the Abarbanel himself holds that this part of Halach Ma'anya, a person should get up. You can't fulfill this at the table. You cannot sit at the table. You have to get up, open your front door, and say it by the front door to make it very real. Yes, this year I would suggest inviting other people to your Seder due to the current pandemic, but in general, the Abarbanel holds you need to go to your front door, open it, and call out Halach Ma'anya, this whole paragraph. Interesting minhag, which some do nowadays. So let's read this paragraph. There's many different versions. Many different versions of the Haggadah. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what page to look on, but it's right at the beginning of your Haggadah, right after the Yachatz, Maggid. It says, Halach ma'anya di'achalnu avatana ba'arad mitzrayim, kol dichbin yetevi yuchal, kol ditzrich yetevi yusach hashata acha, l'shana ba ba'arad Yisrael, hashata acha, avde, l'shana ba ba'arad Yisrael, b'nei chorin. So this paragraph again in Aramaic says that the bread of the affliction of our ancestors that they ate in Egypt, let all who are hungry come and eat, and all in need come and celebrate the Passover. This year we observe it here. Next year we observe it in the land of Israel. This year we're slaves. Next year we be free men in the land of Israel. This is the paragraph, and the question is asked, well, why is the last part of this paragraph mentioned in Hebrew? We just gave a whole reason why it should be in Aramaic. It says, L'shana haba b'nei chorin. L'shana haba b'arad Yisrael. Next year, we should be in the land of Israel. Why is that in Hebrew? So to that, the Shibboleth Eleket answers that this last part is a prayer. We're praying and we're asking Hashem, please bring us back to Israel, redeem us. And also, the places where we used to live, the Goyim understood the common language and they understood Aramaic back then. So we don't want the Goyim, the Gentiles, to know that we're praying to have our speedy redemption, i.e. us trying to skip town and leave being with them. Moving on, why is this matzah called lechem oni? What does it mean when we say lechem oni? So the first answer is given by the Talmud Masechet Pesachim, page 115b. It says that the term oni comes from the terminology of la'anot, to answer, and that is because the matzah is something which provokes many questions and answers about the Exodus. That's why it's called lechem oni. The Ramban Nachmanides explains that oni comes from the terminology of ani, a poor person, and this is because this was the poor man's bread. This is referring to the pain and the suffering the Jewish people had and what they ate in Mitzrayim. In some versions, and specifically the Ashkenaz version of the Haggadah, there are exactly 28 words in this paragraph of Halach Ma'anya. 28 is the numerical value of same numerical value as koach, and Rabbi Glazerson wants to know, is there any correlation with this very special word? He says, actually there is. If you look at our very first verse in our Torah, Genesis 1:1, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz, there's actually 28 letters in that verse. So, what's the secret? What's the deep connection between the two? Rabbi Glazerson explains that, why did the Torah start with Bereshit? And it didn't start where it should have started in the middle of the book of Exodus, in chapter 12 in Exodus, HaChodesh HaZelechem Rosh Chodeshim, which is the very first mitzvah God gave the Jewish people. It was only, as Rashi explains in the beginning of our Torah, only to tell the world, and for God to prove to the world, to civilization, that God is the one and only creator of the world and the universe. And it is up to him. He chooses who, what land goes to anyone and anywhere. And God's intention in creating of the world was to give the land of Israel to the Jewish people. That's why the Torah starts with the creation of the world by God. So too, he says, at the beginning of our Haggadah, we are sending the very same message. Everything that happened in Egypt and our Exodus was not by chance. Just like the world was not created with a Big Bang Theory and one big mistake, so too the Exodus and the 10 plagues specifically was not a mistake. It wasn't a change in temperature, climate, world change. It was not a shifting of tectonic plates that caused all of these calamities to the Egyptians. No, they were clear, targeted strength that God was proving to the world by saving the Jewish people. And this we do right at the beginning of our Seder. B'nai Chorin being the last words, also Rabbi Gleason points out, is something which alludes to one of the 13 attributes of God. The 13 attributes of mercy that God has. One of them is Rav Chesed, which means God is great in kindness. Rav Chesed is the numerical value of 274. So is the words B'nai Chorin, that we are free people. He tells us that in the merit of our mercy, kindness, and hospitality that we have, Hashem will have Rav Chesed, a lot of kindness on us, and through that He'll bring the final redemption in a speedy time, in our time. Amen v'amen. At this point, after the first paragraph, this paragraph of Hananiah is mentioned, then our second cup of wine is filled, and it's left on the table, it's not raised, and then the matzah is covered, and the Seder plate is removed, either removed from the table or put at the end of the table more properly, and this is again done to arouse the attention of the children. It's done many times during the Haggadah, during the Seder. It's covered and uncovered and brought about back just to arouse that of the children. And right now we get to the 4 questions that are asked to our children. The 4 questions are in different orders in different Haggadot. The Sephardic tradition goes one way, the Ashkenaz has a different tradition, but it's still the same 4 questions, just in different orders. The question is asked, why do we start off the Haggadah with questions? We're right now getting into the V'higadta lebincha, the telling of the story of the Exodus to your children. Why do we do it in a question format? So it's based on the verse in Exodus chapter 13, verse 14, where it says, Ve'yakish alecha bincha lemor, and it's going to be when your children will ask you, when your son will ask you, so that's what we have our children ask us at this point. Another explanation is based on the Kuzari, that was mentioned in a previous class, that the best way to teach someone is through question and answer. Once you ask someone a question and now you've got their attention, then it's very easy to teach them. We really want this message of the Exodus to stay with our children, our grandchildren, and our future descendants forever. At this point, we should have the kids say it and maybe even sing this part of the Manishtana. So it starts off by Manishtana, what's different from this night to all other nights, and then we ask the questions. We're going to go with the Sephardic order, being that's the Haggadah that I'm following along with. And the first one is Shebechol Alelot every night we don't even dip once. And tonight we're dipping twice. So firstly, why do we dip twice? So the first answer is based on the Talmud Masechet Psachim, page 110b, where it's just to get the kids' attention. Again, all about the kids. The second answer is that the first time we dip is the karpas in the salt water, and that is to arouse our appetite. The second time we dip is the maror in the charoset, which is to remind us of about the bricks and the mortar that the Jews built in Egypt. So the first one is arousing our appetite, alludes to the freedom. That's one section of our evening, one theme of the evening. The second is that of our bondage and our slavery. That's the second topic of the evening. The Ben Ish Chai gives 2 separate answers. The first answer he gives is that the exile started with dipping, and the Exodus also started with dipping. The exile started with dipping. That's when Joseph's brothers dipped his cloak in the goat's blood. And that, unfortunately, brought to the beginning of the bondage. And the Exodus started with dipping, and that's when God tells the Jewish people to go and slaughter a lamb and dip its blood in reeds and place that on the doorposts of all of the houses in Egypt. The second answer the Ben Ish Chai gives is the first dipping is referred to the enslavement that started by the Egyptians. That was through soft words, karpas being something sweet, dipped into salt water. So they sweet talked the Jewish people into slavery, into labor. However, maror, the second time we dip, is into charoset, into the brick and mortar, was the hard, backbreaking labor that was done for the unfortunately by the Egyptians to the Jews. The second is the question is every night normally we eat chametz and matzah. Tonight is only all matzah. The third question that we ask is maror. We eat normally all vegetables and tonight is only maror. So how is this truly different than all of the nights? Meaning, I don't know about you, but tonight I had lettuce. I don't always, but tonight I had romaine lettuce for dinner. And yesterday I had celery with my tuna. So these are vegetables that we normally eat. So the reason why it makes it very different the night of the Seder is because, as the Abudraham says, tonight we eat these vegetables with a clear obligation, as the karpas and as the maror, opposed to on a regular night where we don't. And the Perush Kadmon says that we have special intention when we eat these, when we have the karpas and when we have the maror, and therefore that is why it makes this night very different. And the last question that is asked is that we normally, sometimes we recline, sometimes we sit up, but tonight, everybody reclines. And why do we recline is one of the great questions. So the Rambam says, Maimonides says, in order that we should feel free, it's very royal to recline. Aruch HaShulchan explains that we do this in order to gain the attention of the kids. So the Abarbanel, in his genius way, he sees a pattern in these questions, and he brings us based on a rule that in Jewish court you always need two witnesses to pass a verdict. And he says right here we have two witnesses for the slavery and two witnesses for the redemption. The two for the slavery are the matzah and the maror, and the two for the redemption is the dipping and the reclining. Now we go on to answer the four questions, and that is the very famous Avadim Hayinu. And before we say Avadim Hayinu, is we bring back the Seder plate and we uncover the matzot. And now we are going to start with the very, very deep explanation of that verse of V'higadta lebincha. Right now, in the first word, we're going to focus on the V'higadta. So we read Avadim Hayinu, and I'll read it. Avadim Hayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves for Paro in Egypt. And God spared us. He took us out of there. He saved us with His strong and His outstretched hand. And if God would not have taken our ancestors out of Egypt, we and our children, our grandchildren would all still be in Egypt, slaves to Paro in Egypt. And even if we're all very smart, very wise, and we know a lot of Torah, we have an obligation to speak about, to recount the tales and the great depths of the story of the Exodus. And anyone who recounts, the more a person recounts about the story of the Exodus, it is praiseworthy. So on this, we want to analyze how does this paragraph of Avadim Hayinu answer the four questions. We asked four questions previously regarding to leaning, to chametz and matzah, to dipping, to the maror. How does this paragraph of Avadim Hayinu answer those four questions? So the first answer is really, it's not answering it now. It's really going to only answer later. This is just an introduction of our Jewish history of getting into the journey of oppression and then eventually the Exodus, but we only answer this question when we get to later on in the Haggadah, towards the end of Maggid, where we say Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. The Shibboleth HaLeket, however, says, no, you know what Avadim Hayinu is answering? It's only answering the fourth question, and that it's telling us that we were slaves, and that's why we recline. The Abarbanel, however, gives a separate answer, and he says, really, this Avadim Hayinu is coming to answer all four of the questions. You see, according to his explanation of that there were two witnesses for the aspect of the slavery, and then two witnesses for the aspect of the redemption. So too here, we are coming and we are answering all four of them. How? By coming and telling us that we were slaves, and we were oppressed by the Egyptian people. And then in one night, God came and He redeemed us. He came and He saved us, and He brought us from avdut to cherut, from slavery to freedom. And this is a mini paragraph of teaching us how that the first two things we do, matzah and maror, is with regards to the slavery aspect, and then the dipping and the reclining is with regards to the redemption aspect. So then we have to ask ourselves, why does this tell us that we were slaves to Paro in Egypt? Avadim hayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim. No, just avadim hayinu. We were slaves. Why specifically to Paro and to Mitzrayim? Of course, that's where we were, but why are we making a big deal out of that? So to that, Rashi tells us that we were not just slaves. We were slaves to a very hard and harsh king, Paro, in a very impure land. The land of Egypt was completely impure, and that's what made it even harder for the Jewish people. Why does it say that God deliberately took us out? He didn't really take us out, he took our ancestors out. And the answer is self-evident, based in this very own paragraph, is that if we would have not been taken out back then by God, we would still be there today. Something that we all need to remember. Can you imagine living life with can we imagine living life still being slaves to Paro? Now, the end of this paragraph says, Hareze mishubach, it is praiseworthy. The more you speak about and recount the tale of the Exodus, the more praiseworthy it is. And it is important to know that this is the only mitzvah, the only Torah obligation that a person has, that they cannot have an issue of going overboard, meaning there's no isur bal tosif. In every other mitzvah, there is a limit. There's a limit to what you can do. But here there is absolutely no limit. Now the Haggadah continues and tells us about the stories of other great sages who also did fulfill this mitzvah of recounting the story of the Exodus. It's important to note, I just want to remind everybody, that there is 8 sections in this large section of the 5th step. Maggid has 8 sections, and the first section was the Halachmanya. The second section we just finished, which was the Manishtana and the Avadim Hayinu, and now we're going into the 3rd section, which is Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different rabbis, and all 5 of these rabbis who spent Shayu Mesubin Bivnei Brak Ve'ayu Mesaprim B'Tziat Mitzrayim Kol Oto Halayla. All night long they were studying and mentioning about the story of the Exodus. Ad Sheba'u Talmidim V'amru Lahem, until their students came to them and said, Rabboteinu Higia Azman Kriyat Shema Shel Shacharit. Rabbis, you've been up all night, and now it's already time for Shacharit, Kriyat Shema. Hopefully not to miss it. Sorry about that. Okay, now this paragraph. Something interesting to note about this paragraph is that these 5 rabbis were all either Kohanim, Leviim, and Rabbi Akiva himself was son or descendant of converts. And what it's interesting to notice is that all 5 of these their own ancestors did not take place in part of the bondage, right? Obviously a convert not, son of converts, and obviously anyone who was part of the tribe of Levi was not prescribed to the bondage and the slavery. And nevertheless they still spent so much importance and time in doing the mitzvah of recounting the Exodus. So if they would, and they're all Chachamim and Nivonim and great Torah scholars, so too we should. Another thing that Sfat Emet, which Sfat Emet adds in a beautiful way, is that this was not on the Leil Seder, was not on Passover night that they did this, because where are their wives and their children? Why would they be there alone? Plus, some of them didn't even live in Bnei Brak where it says that they were, and for that reason, this was such a great mitzvah that it was not even fulfilled on the night of the Seder. It's any time to speak about the Exodus is a beautiful and very important thing. The next paragraph is Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Harei ani kiven 70 shana, I'm like 70 years old, v'lo zachichi tutomar yitzay mitzrayim ba'alilot, ad shedarsha ben zuma shneimar, למען תזכור את יום צדך מארץ מצרים כל ימי חייך, ימי חייך הימים, כל ימי חייך הלילות, וחכמים אומרים כל ימי חייך העולם הזה, וכל ימי חייך להביא לימות המשיח. So the great merit of recounting the story of the Exodus is brought down over here by Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who was one of the previous 5 sages, and he says that not only that we should do so during the day, we should also recount it during the night, and that's what we do Leil Seder. And this world we have the great merit for it, but also in the world to come we get merit for it. speaking about the Exodus. One interesting thing to note is, why does he say he's like 70 years old? He wasn't 70. So the truth is, he was not 70 years old. He was only 18 at this time, the Talmud tells us. But he was elected to become the Nasi, the great leader for the Jewish people at such a young age. And he prayed to Hashem, Hashem, please help me. I look so young. What am I going to do? How are people going to respect me? How are people going to take me seriously? So he woke up the next morning, and he had 18 strands of white in his beard. So people took him seriously. The Rambam, Maimonides, says that he learned so much Torah that it aged him and it withered him out, and he looked like he was 70 even though he was only 18. The Birkat Ashir brings down that according to the Arizal, the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was a Gilgul, a reincarnation of Shmuel Hanavi. Shmuel Hanavi passed away when he was 52 years old, plus the 18 years of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is 70 years old. At this point, we are going to speak about the next part, which is an introduction to the four children, as we end off by saying Baruch HaMakom, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shenatan Torah L'Amo Yisrael, Baruch Hu, we say blessed is Hashem, blessed is the place, blessed is Hashem who gave us the Torah to the Jewish people, blessed is He. And a interesting, important thing to mention over here is that the Pirush HaKadmon says this is the bracha that we're mentioning for the Birkat Haggadah. The Kolbo says that the reason why we say Baruch 4 times over here is based on the 4 sons that we're about to speak about. Rabbi Cheskel Levenstein says that the reason why we refer to Hashem as Hamakom is because God is really everywhere at all times, as it says, Melo chol haaretz kevodo, as it says in Yeshayahu chapter 6 verse 3, that Hashem is everywhere at all times, and He is also with everyone, even with all 4 kids, as different as they are. So hope to see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we will continue with the Haggadah, picking up with the 4 sons that the Torah speaks about. Thank you.